when I ran the rainbow and the night would shine in the back of my mind. I never saw a valley walking along the street and following me, and that's okay.
Hi. Oh, hang on. Put this in, but I haven't put that in. Cool. Yacht.
Hi.
Hi.
Welcome to the internet.
Thank you. It's just two.
We never left.
It's just 2/3 of us. There's one more of us.
Yeah, but we can't have
Two-thirds of yacht.
social distancing.
Yeah.
Can you introduce yourselves and tell us about Yacht in like 100 words or less?
Okay.
My name is Jona.
My name is Claire. Yacht is a band that has existed for 18 years. It's an acronym for Young Americans Challenging High Technology, which is like, it maybe comes off as adversarial, but it's really more about dialogue and trying to bend tools a little bit beyond their intended purposes. We've kind of come from a DIY Pacific Northwest indie punk background. And so, I mean, the band started with Jona. Just Jona. It was like an electronic music project, solo, laptop performance, early 2000s laptop performance. And then we've kind of just been like expanding that for a really long time now and doing lots of projects that are musical, non-musical, very experimental. We tend to, this is way more than 100 words I'm realizing now, but yeah, we do things because we want to learn about them. And we're both like super autodidactic, and when we're interested in something, we just try to make a project out of it so we can teach ourselves what it is, which is how we got into machine learning.
And you guys are in LA now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. And the third member of Yacht is Rob. Where's he at?
Yes, he's also in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
He's maybe 5 miles away from us if he's home.
Less. I think it's more like 3.
Yeah. Okay, so 18 years is
Yeah.
a long time.
Too long.
So, and you spent 3 of those years on this record, like on the chain trip. Yeah, is that right?
Yeah.
Totally.
Maybe 4.
4.
I mean, it's hard to really say when we started working on it. I think 2016 is when we got kind of properly serious about framing out the project, but it came together in fits and starts because it relied on a lot of collaborations with people who had other jobs and other, projects. And so we sort of pieced it together over a long time and then actually recorded it over the course of maybe 6 to 8 months in 2017.
Yeah.
Did you know it was going to take that long, or were you sort of like, oh, hey, we're going to use machine learning to make things easy, so we'll get this record done really quick? Or?
We thought it would be faster. Yeah. We came to the project thinking that maybe we could just feed some sort of algorithm raw audio and then get raw audio in return, and that would be it. Yeah. But that was not the case at all.
Yeah, it was kind of a rabbit hole. I mean, as soon as we realized, I think we had ambitions for it that were sort of beyond what the state of the art is, and when we discovered what the state of the art was and how complicated it was and how much a human in the loop is necessary to make anything meaningful or interesting, it was like, it could have been a deterrent, I suppose, but I think it just made us more excited to really get into it and to actually have us be able to carve out a space for ourselves in this process. Like, we thought this project was going to be sort of about automation, and then as soon as we started working, we were like, oh no, this is like our entire, every creative choice that we make is so much more complicated and so much more interesting, and these tools are going to create these like weird provocations and interventions in an existing process that is going to like be delightful and surprising and strange and challenging and fun and make us make a totally different kind of record than we've ever made before. And I think we needed that because 18 years. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you guys have engaged with technology like the whole way along with your project. So I imagine you would have been aware of machine learning techniques a long time before 2016, but was there a specific project or a specific thing that made you both go, okay, now's the time that we're going to do it?
Not really.
No, there was a handful of no's. So we first saw Deep Dream. I was on the spot. I was like, I never want to work with anything that looks like that at all.
I was really into it, like conceptually.
That's the dog faces that image.
Actually, now it sort of seems interesting again. But
puppy slugs, But no, so that was the first time that I think I saw like an art related or creative project using machine learning, and I was immediately turned off. Until I saw video, because the Deep Dream video is pretty amazing. But anyway, still, I think it took until I don't know. What was the first thing?
I don't know. I mean, I think we had this idea that was actually like came more from sort of science fiction, and like I had done this talk and series of essays about the future of music, and like looking at science fiction for reference, like looking at how music is presented in, you know, Star Trek and stuff, and how that's like so much more about the present than it is, you know, than it is about the future. And so I was thinking about like future of music in these kind of grand, like 60s sci-fi, like broad strokes, like, and AI will like decide what music you like kind of terms. And it wasn't really until we were like, what does that actually mean in practice, that we started looking at actual creative projects that were being made with these tools.
Yeah.
But we didn't see any music thing that we really liked. So
yeah, one of the first like text things was Ross Goodwin's movie Sunspring.
In a future with mass unemployment, young people are forced to sell blood. It's something I can do.
You should see the boy and shut up.
For me, that was the exact moment. Was that,
Yeah.
and how creative.
yeah,
it
because
was,
there was something about the way.
bizarrely, not inspiring, like profound. There was just this weird profoundness to it. Yeah.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
No, I think there's something really interesting about the way that like that script on paper, the way that script reads on paper as like a text generated by a machine, and the way it reads when it's performed by actors and on sets with, you know, some context and talent, you know, like how much meaning lives in that space between what we say and how we say it. And that's something that immediately for me as a writer of songs was like, oh, we could do this with songs. Like we could sing these lyrics that are like nonsense, you know, plausible nonsense, but we can make them mean something by the performance and by the choices that we make. And that is like a tantalizing kind of idea and something to buy. So we like, that's why we saw that, and then we immediately found Ross and decided to work with him.
It's interesting though, like you're going into it with your eyes open a bit there, I guess, because you're not going into it going, oh, we're going to write these perfect songs that make sense. You're going into it knowing there's inevitably going to be these artifacts of absurdity or surrealism embedded in it. And that obviously suits you as people, as artists, in ways that other musicians might kind of get those results and go, oh, this is too weird. I could never do anything, because it doesn't make sense, you know, like.
Yeah, well, nothing, I mean, this is like one of the things we're always trying to hammer when we're talking about this stuff, is that the output is not the end of the process by any means, you know, like if it's the middle of the process, and maybe if you're on the code side and you're just, you know, working with an artist, maybe it's the end of the process for you, but there's so much that has to be done with that output in order to make it meaningful and interesting. And like every single choice that you make as an artist is important, like has a heightened importance, because it's really like you're trying to like congeal this like a pattern out of chaos. And I mean, that's what art is all about.
So when you were sort of sussing it out and experimenting right at the start, you know, you're just finding, I imagine you're just finding tools and things on the internet you can download and muck around with yourselves. Did you need, like, what kind of coding or technical background do you guys have? And did you need that to get started?
Yeah.
Yes, none, and yes.
I can write HTML and CSS, and I can program audio software like Ableton, but no, we're not programmers. We're
not at all. So we were looking first for like what tools are there that non-programmers can use, which in 2016-ish, like the answer was there were either like these sort of startup companies that were making, you know, kind of
quote unquote AI.
Yeah, they were doing like sort of practical music for, you know, hold music and for, you know, license-free, royalty-free licensable music for YouTube videos and, you know, music essentially, you know, the sort of functional music. And then there was like a pocket of the research science community that was like sort of making tools accessible to artists, but assuming that artists would have way more technical knowledge than is reasonable to expect, or, you know, particularly it's pretty exclusive. So we kind of did a thing where we talked to some of these startup-y companies and, you know, had the conversations with them about like, okay, well, could you make a yacht song? And the narrative around that was always like, oh, you want a yacht song? Like, no problem, we'll make one for you in 2 hours or less, you know, like, have you always wanted like a fourth member of your band that just, you know, like never sleeps and doesn't drink, and this is the thing for you, you know, really trying to like present it like some kind of solution to a problem, which is not what we were looking for at all, although we fucked around with it. And then the other side was like the really sort of hardcore. So we ended up like reaching out to a lot of more technical people than us, and then just like like monkeys at a typewriter trying to like jam these tools until something came out. Like when we went into the studio, the tool that we use, which I'm sure we'll get into. Oh, Jona's going deep into the archives. Oh yeah, good idea. When we went into the studio, the tool we ended up using like had a what's it called? A collab notebook, which is like a spreadsheet essentially, and that was like enough of a user interface, like enough toggles for us to toggle. That eventually we figured out which toggles to toggle to get it to spit things out, but like we didn't understand anything that was happening under the hood. If we ever had any problem, we had to just be like, well, start over completely from the beginning because we don't know how to fix this.
Yeah.
But that's honestly like, I mean, that's what a neural network is essentially. It's a black box system, you know, like at a certain point, like even the people who know how to build these things don't fully understand what's going on in the moment between input and output. So I was sort of comforted by that thought.
Yeah. So tell me more about the collab notebooks, because that's kind of where you started, right? Like where the process started. Can you talk me through?
Yeah, that's when it got serious.
Yeah.
But okay.
I guess it really started with first having to notate our entire back catalog.
Yeah.
So we made a lot of decisions. Did you talk about rules?
No, not yet. You're only gone for like 13 seconds.
Okay. It felt like a long time. I went to the garage. Yeah. So
you got to go for walks. It's important to get out, even just to the garage and back. If it's what you need, you just, yeah.
I needed a beat. I did wash my hands. Talk about the rules, I guess.
Well, I think another thing that we sort of crossed off the list early on was this idea that we could work with raw audio at all, because at least when we were working, like just the way that you had to compress those files in order to actually train a model using a reasonable amount of computing power meant that the output just sounded like kind of lo-fi and shitty.
Yeah.
Which is interesting in its own way.
There's been some people who like there is some tools for working with audio. But you didn't get very far. Like, did you end up creating things that sounded like Yacht or
yeah,
not?
Yeah. I mean, we used sample RNN, which is what Holly Herndon used, and we used WaveNet and GANsynth. Yeah. We
ended up using some of that stuff as sort of samples on the record, but it just like building an entire album out of just that kind of that sonic landscape was just kind of harsh.
Yeah.
We made songs that were like full collages of all these things, and it was super interesting to hear like what a machine learning system thinks like my human voice sounds like. It sounded like this like desperate yelp from another dimension.
Yeah.
But you know, we're trying to make pop music, so we crossed that off the list pretty early on and decided to focus only on, you know, symbolic musical data, just notes.
For composition. I mean, we still peppered sample RNN samples throughout the record, and we use NSynth a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But we figured we would get the most out of actually just like writing, you know, using MIDI basically. So we had to, but in order to do that, we had to notate our entire back catalog into MIDI, and like every single pattern of the melody for every single song, which is like, you know, dozens of patterns per song for
82 songs.
82 songs,
yeah.
Which took us a really long time. We did some of it, and then ultimately found someone on Fiverr to do the rest.
Yeah, so we hired a nice man.
A very nice man. And then we took sort of 16-bar clips from those.
Between 2, 4, and 16 bars.
Yeah, from those melodies, and ran them through this music VAE model, which is a latent space interpolation model.
Yeah.
Using this collab notebook, basically over and over and over again until we had like hundreds of different melodic patterns to choose from.
And rhythmic patterns, not just patterns.
Yeah. There's not really any chords on the album because there was no way to really do chords.
But yeah, the chord model didn't exist at the time.
Right.
So we had one email to one of the developers, Ian Goodfellow, and yeah, he was working on a beta of a latent space interpolation model with chords that supported chords, and so we got to use an early version of that. But at that point, we had written, I think, 12 songs, and yeah, 8 of which made it on the record. And then we ended up using the chord model for 2 songs. So only 2 of the songs have chords. There's like chord changes are implied, but yeah, there's no actual performed chords on the record.
So yeah, we had to do all these in order to actually work with like that. These just like raw MIDI files of just patterns and melodies that went on forever, or like didn't really repeat, or just were like not anything to actually hold on to. We had to take those patterns and then assign them to different instruments and to drums and vocal melodies, and then sort of cut them up with an X-Acto knife and arrange them into a puzzle from like a million different puzzle boxes into one song, and then perform everything live. So it's this kind of like also kind of physical embodied challenge of trying to perform music that is written by a system which has no relationship to the body really. And that's actually like where most of the big like takeaways for us were just like realizing how much of our experience as musicians is in the body and is about like what feels good and what feels natural and what we've sort of developed muscle memory around.
We're untrained musicians, just like we're not programmers. So anything we've ever played just comes from hearing a song and trying to replicate it, which I think is the experience of a lot of like punk players. Yeah. So reading sheet music and trying to perform something that you haven't actually composed to yourself is always a challenge. And I think that's where the most interesting moments happen. But this was extra difficult and so frustrating at times. There was a 2-bar drum fill that I had to learn for like 30 minutes. It was so boring and so frustrating. And ultimately, like it's not like this exceptional moment on the record, because also one of our rules, we didn't want to make a record that sounded like machine learning or sounded like algorithmic. So a lot of the choices we made ended up being like pretty subtle, but are brain-breakingly hard to perform.
Yeah.
And
Okay, well here's a question. Was it fun?
At times it was super fun.
Yeah.
Most of the time it wasn't.
Yeah.
I think we all have different points on the fun spectrum. Like for me, the most fun moment was like sitting in the studio with this giant block of song lyrics, which is what Jona got out of the garage just now, which is like this one pass through the model that Ross built for us.
Yeah.
Just print it out.
It's a single sheet of dot matrix printer paper.
I love it.
I actually spent a while trying to figure out how to get the printer to use its default like onboard font, because I didn't want to impose any sort of font on it.
He's not a programmer. But yeah, and just like highlighting things that were interesting, because it was like this journey through the psychedelic text that was.
In fact, just as a use case, we should just flip through something and pick. Yeah, because there's always something new and always something great. Well, here you can talk about temperature here.
Okay, so here we have just the words "don't stop, don't stop, don't stop, don't stop"
over 7 pages or something.
And then every once in a while it's "don't stop, don't stop, don't stop, don't stop." And this is the thing that happens sometimes, where it just sort of gets stuck into this loop where it's.
We all do that.
Yeah.
We all do that from time to time. It's repetitive.
We all do.
Yeah.
Here we go.
And then other times it's more complex. You know, you get these like, it's pretty good. One more thing on my mind, because I'm not going to get on the chain. If I seem to want to start, because it's all gone mad, it's all going to happen to you. It's just like infinite that. You know, it's kind of like nothing, and it means nothing.
Yeah.
But if you just like break it up in certain ways and perform it in certain ways and arrange it in certain ways, you can force it to mean something.
I think I'm not a piece of fact.
Ooh, that's good.
Well, it almost goes back to that idea of latent space. So it's like that. Well, I mean, songwriters often talk about, you know, even though a song might have come from somewhere or is telling a story or means something to them, you often hear songwriters say, like, I'm not going to tell you what it's about because I want the listener to put the meaning into the words. This is like almost the most, you know, as about as far as you can take that, because, you know.
You hit the hammer on the nail right there. Quarantine. No, I say that a lot. I think about it a lot. Like, it's so much of pop music, so much of music is about projecting your own experience as an audience, as a listener of music, is projecting your own experiences onto lyrics that are written about something specific that you have no relationship to whatsoever. And it's remarkable how much we can share, even when the artist is not giving us, you know, keys about what things actually are supposed to mean. And I think the fun thing about this album is that, like, I was having that experience. We were having that whole experience the whole time that we were making it. And even now when we play it live, which of course we'll never do again, but you know, we're all trying to figure it out together. You know, the audience is trying to understand it. I'm trying to understand it. It means something different every night. Maybe it's very fluid. It's like this kind of new state of being, a new relationship to music that is like, has less sort of ego and ownership and is more like this constant discovery.
Do you miss, though, that personal connection just as an artist? Like, do you miss that when you're performing the songs, for example, compared to a song that you did write that is about, you know, your feelings or your experience? Is there something that you want?
Even a song I did write, like, I mean, there's songs that I've been singing on stage for 10 years and they have meant different things over the course of that time. You know, they meant one thing when we wrote them, they mean something very different now. And that's part of it. It's like meaning is fluid even when we mean to mean things.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
I'm sure the pop stars that perform songs really believe what they're conveying, even if they didn't write the lyrics or the melodies or anything.
And I think there's just like this moment of like joy and creativity when you're, I mean, I'm a writer, and it's like when you're writing something that you are connected to, it's like you have this moment of like, oh wow, wonderful, like I'm communicating. And that moment, as soon as it's put into a song or in an article or a book, like it's sort of, you lose your relationship to it. It just becomes like this cast off, you know, this slowing of the skin, that's just part of the world. And so like I still had that relationship with this text, but it was more like in the process of arranging an assembly, I would have these moments where like a piece of meaning would come into shape, and I could like project my own narrative onto it and think about how to perform it. And that was like as exciting, and then it's cast off again like everything else.
Yeah, and still in regards to melodies and drum patterns and everything too, I still feel ownership over them because we had to make every choice of what we're selecting. That's for me, that's the same thing as writing.
Yeah, writing is editing.
I read that the data set for the lyrics wasn't just your stuff. It was also like there's like a big corpus. What was it? It's like 20 gigabytes of text.
Yeah, but
you guys can't have written 20 gigabytes worth of yacht lyrics. So
20 megabytes, which is
20 megabytes. Oh, one of your interviews needs to get a fact check. So,
but that's so much text. That's,
20 gigabytes is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But, so what's the other content? You know, and
it's basically everything we've ever loved. I mean, we wanted to create a text model based on only our own writing, but there just isn't enough data. Like you need such a vast amount of data for a text model. For these models. Text models.
Yeah. In the future, it won't be that, but that felt like the first compromise in our purity and in the vision of this project being very pure. Yeah.
But then it's like, okay, well, what goes into the neural network that is me in terms of like my influences, you know? So we basically like wrote down every artist we'd ever loved, like everything we grew up listening to, everything, like all our friends' bands.
We had to do 2 passes too. So the first pass was just everything we love and all of our friends and our musical community. And that ended up not being enough. So then we just had to name like every band we could think of. And that's how we got to that list.
Yeah. Wow. That's what it's trained on. So basically the model that Ross built for us, which is a car RNN. I love like machine learning has absolutely no sense of style when it comes to naming things. Like it's impossible to say anything out loud.
But a character
a
character recurrent neural network.
So it's like this text generated machine that all it knows about language is just like the music that we like, which is pretty fun.
And this model's already obsolete.
And it's not like it doesn't overfit, you know, so it doesn't ever give us anything that's already existed in the world. Although one time Ross was demoing it for us and we were scrolling through like pages and pages and pages of like crazy speculative generative text, and then there was like 2 lines of House of the Rising Sun just in the middle, which is like just the model was just overfitting, but it kind of felt really like a ghost in the machine. Did it just spontaneously write House of the Rising Sun?
Yeah. Well, do you worry that there is a snippet in one of your songs that you might?
We googled everything. No, we cross-referenced it all. We were very vigilant about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
How can you do that? How can you cross-reference it against every single 20 megabytes of text? I guess you can do that. I guess you just.
I mean, everything we ended up using on the record, like we googled all the phrases to make sure they didn't exist elsewhere.
Yeah.
It's
not like you do that with any other album, right? Like, would you have ever done that with a yacht record before, gone through and made sure that your melody hadn't been replicated somewhere else before?
No,
maybe people with like major label resources have to do that with publishers and stuff, but we've never done that.
But I'm sure that it happens. I mean, I've heard many stories from different artists who think they came up with something, and then it's like years later they're like, oh no, that was just whatever, this like Pink Floyd song or something. Everything's floating around in there.
Yeah. Something you mentioned before was that you really early on, consciously, at least with the music, decided you didn't want the machine learning aesthetic. You know, that you wanted, you didn't want it to sound crap, I guess.
We call that the computer accent.
Yeah. And because I feel like, you know, on the one hand, I completely understand that, but on the flip side is also this idea that it's the flaws in the process at the moment might become the thing that is kind of fetishized. I'm curious because with a lot of the visual content around the record, you know, you are very much like it with the videos, for example, you're very much leaning into the machine learning aesthetic, almost inevitably, because that's So I'm curious how you feel about that. You know, like,
I think it's an artful balance. Like, of course, even if we tried, we wouldn't be able to remove the machine learning aesthetic because of the way that because of the process itself. Like, those artifacts remain. There's all kinds of, you know, deeply weird melodies, deeply weird idioms, deeply weird just everything. You know, things that no human would ever write. And those are part of it. But I think for us, it's just about like arranging those in such a way that they can be showcased. They can be showcased in a way that's compelling for people. You know, I don't want to make music that's alienating necessarily. I think that part of this for us is about kind of showing and explaining what these tools are to our immediate community. And I don't want these tools to be scary. I want to show that you can make things that are joyful and loving and, you know, fun and have like some of the structure of pop and the feeling that you get from pop. associated with them.
Yeah, at least that was the MO for this specific project.
And we were trying to make like not just any record, we're trying to make like a yacht record. And we are a poppy dance band, you know, like that's what people come to our shows to experience. That's like where the joy is. So I think we wanted to retain that connection to the form, but it's, you know, it's all still there. The machine aesthetic is still there. And we talk about it and think about it a lot. Like the fact that even now, only a couple of years after the record came out officially, like all the technology we use is obsolete basically, like, or has been integrated into different platforms and made easier to use, or has been replaced by something else. And so it's just like, it is like always going to be a document of that specific moment in machine learning and art. And I'm super interested to see how we look back on this moment, not just us, but all of us, you know, like are we going to be nostalgic for this sort of like early AI aesthetic before the AI got really scary and insidious, this sort of wonkiness where it was still showing the seams and was kind of charming. I think we're definitely that's going to be like the vinyl and the, you know, the analog camera filter of 2030. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you look at the early internet as being this kind of like the utopian ideal of it, and then like how there's like a real charm now around the aesthetic of those early GIFs and GeoCities and all of that kind of stuff, MySpace even. And now the internet, you know, social media, these big tech platforms, it's come to symbolize for a lot of people something much more dystopian. It's an interesting idea. People might like 20 years from now be looking back at a record like yours and going like, oh, back before
were we ever so innocent?
It's funny. It's like, do you guys think too much about that, or like do you think about where you land on that utopia versus dystopia narrative that gets wrapped up in all this stuff? You know, you mentioned Holly Herndon before, and she's very much on the front foot in terms of trying to put a positive vision of what some of these tools are capable of. But on the flip side, you've got some really kind of major ethical problems that haven't been addressed, and
it's super fucking complicated. You know, it's all of this stuff are the thorny issues of our time that we need to be engaging with as artists and having a relationship to, and like understanding what we're even talking about. Because I feel like most of the dialogue about AI still is like, it's still Skynet, Big Brother, like it's still this sort of very simplistic pop cultural science fiction representation, you know. And I think artists and everybody need to be wading into the trenches and like actually working with these tools and figuring out how to make meaning from them and figuring out how to sort of use themselves as like a, you know, a lens by which to explain different aspects of what it is and what it does to us as a culture and as individuals. And then we can actually have like a real conversation about what it even is. Yep. But we are not on the utopia side of the spectrum at all, you know. Like, in fact, I mean, oddly, I think my relationship to machine learning has been about like the way that it allows us to appreciate and sample from the past, you know, like just by virtue of the way that we train neural networks on all this historical data, it forces you to like think about what you love and what you have a relationship to, what you think is going to be meaningful, and like put that together in a collection and you know, like really, I don't know, I think if we use these tools right, they can help us to like understand how we got to where we are and like help us sort of analyze and understand the past and then hopefully not repeat it. But at the same time, on the flip side, the tool is sort of the way that it's used, at least in industry, is like this kind of reiteration of the past mistakes in a really linear way, because there's always this assumption that the past model predicts the future and doesn't take into account how complex human beings are and the world around us. So yeah, who fucking knows?
So are you guys working on much music at the moment, lockdown style?
We kind of are, but we're having a hard time. We're doing a lot of covers. We've been, I think we're going to put out like a quarantine covers album, because
we're doing one every week. Yeah. And I like having something that we can complete, having something that has a finish, that there's a clear end to it. And so, yeah, I don't think we can make new music right now. I don't think we can write songs.
Yeah, it's like, how do you make art about the time that we live? It's just, none of us understand it well enough right now. But covers are like, it's making music, but it's constructive and has an order to it. And it's been fun, actually, another way for us to revisit our influences and things that we really love and try to, in a kind of a similar way, embody them.
And we're doing a lot of collage and stop motion animation too.
We're basically like eating weed gummies and doing collage.
I think we're going to move on to claymation this week, which wish us luck.
Which God help us.
Yeah. Do you have a green screen? So many green screens.
No. We have a very janky home setup.
I was listening to the Sparks cover that I think you just wrote this morning, just before we started chatting. And it was funny because I had been listening to Chain Tripping just before, and then I put that on. Some part of my brain instantly was like assumed that the lyrics were bots. Like there was just something about there is
something about those lyrics that it definitely feels like a low temperature, like repetitive.
Yeah. I love it. I love those lyrics.
It's also for me, like maybe because I mean I've listened to your music for a while, but now after getting into Chain Tripping, I'm worried that somewhere in my brain it now just associates the sound of that.
You're like,
sounds like we gave you, what is the bad pill in the Matrix?
Don't go into
we allowed you to see the world as it really is. You know? It's a kaleidoscope of shifting meaning.
Everything's a collage.
Everything can be interpreted a million ways. I feel like I'm experiencing that in quarantine, especially because like there's only so much to look at, and it's like everything can be looked at so many different ways, and so many things. You can learn so many things when it's immediately around you if you just look at it differently.
Well, cool. One final question, which is anyone who wants to get started, basically, with machine learning tools, musician, I guess, specifically. I mean, it's, as you said, the tools change so quickly and things are different now to what they were when you guys started this whole process. But if someone wanted to get into it now, like where would you send them? Are there websites they should go to or particular software, or is it more about a mentality of approaching it?
Yeah, I think it's about what you want to get out of it, and then finding the tool that gets out of the way and just lets you experiment. And if you can have fun doing this, then you definitely should, and you should chase that path. I think everything that Taro has made, I think, is really great for starters. There's a lot of web audio applications. He has a studio called Counterpoint, and his last name is pronounced
Parvinian. He's Finnish.
He's
Parvinian. I wrote it down phonetically once.
We worked on a typography tool with him. It's a free web app that you can generate fonts based on bitmap fonts, so pixely fonts.
He's made
everything that he's made is wonderful.
Yeah, he's made a lot of really cool explainers that also contextualize this stuff within the history of generative music and avant-garde music, which I think is like a really important link to make that a lot of people are making.
Yeah, maybe start with watching that presentation. There's an interactive presentation.
And then there's, the Magenta tools, which, we used one of them, but there are a lot of them that I'm sure you could find an interesting way to like poke and prod until it creates something that's meaningful to you.
And now it's an Ableton plugin, so it's a lot easier.
So much easier. Yeah. And of course, there's not music tools in Runway, but there's lots of tools you can use peripherally. we used the GPT-2 model in Runway to name the album.
Yeah, we used DensePose to do video. Yeah.
We used the captioning model to do like weird video experiments. I think it's just fun to I really appreciate things like Runway. And I know this is supposed to sort of be about Runways, but I'd like the fact that it's kind of like this skin on top of all the incomprehensible, GitHub stuff. To me,
it's invaluable.
That like makes just gets out of the way and allows you to just use the tool directly, which is, once that it becomes standard across all the models, we're going to see like an explosion of creativity, because it's just so fun to fuck around with and so unexpected. You put things in and what you get out is like not ever what you thought it was going to be, and that's just on a purely experiential level really fun. So
and for me, it's really reminiscent of using computers to make things for the first time. So like when I was in 8th grade, using the first version of Premiere to edit video and using every single effect, being able to experiment like that in a whole new paradigm, like with Runway, is totally radical and really, really fun. I think, just click as much as you can. Don't be afraid of clicking around.
Jona's a big advocate of clicking around.
Yeah, I don't read manuals. I just click around,
just wantonly clicks.
Awesome. Well, thank you for this. This has been great.
Thank you. Thanks for including us.
Of course. Stay safe in LA.
Same.
You too.
And make more music, human or otherwise.
Humanoid.